Welcome to Going In Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and this week we're talking with a firefighter or former firefighter paramedic. She worked in the field for 10 years before transitioning into mental health. So now she's a therapist and a hypnotherapist who also works with psychedelic assisted therapies. So I'm sure with her own background, probably seeing some horrible things, we'll get a very unique lens on all of this stuff. And I don't think that we've dug into hypnotherapy on here before. So very, very excited to do so. But before we do, just a couple quick announcements as usual. If you are new to the show, there's a very powerful story behind it. So you can head over to zachtidwell.com and read about what I'm talking about there. If any of that piques your interest, you can also reach out to me for speaking engagements and stuff like that. Without further ado, Ashlea, thank you, or I guess Ashlea Dillard, because I didn't say your full name yet. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be here and talk about all the things. So I'm here for it.
All of the things. Yeah. So I I feel like a safe place to start here is 10 years into being a firefighter is you've invested a lot of time at that point. So something had to have triggered that or had to have triggered that shift, correct?
It's Everyone always asks me that question, and that there must have been some moment that made you decide to leave. But for me, it really was a collection of events. So it was kind of that slow boiling frog in a pot of water is it was a lot of things over time that kind of led me to the decision point of, okay, if I stick with plan A, keep doing the things that I'm doing, I'm going to have to make some big changes in myself. I'm going to have to figure out how to take care of myself better, and or just try to continue liking and doing the job, or it's time to play big and step into a different role and choose myself and look at what's being presented to me and being okay with a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainty, but down in my gut knowing that that's the right path forward. So it's really cool to me looking back. It's a cool way to see it where it wasn't just one thing that led me to the decision. I really had to sit with this. I really had to evaluate where my life was, what the quality of my life was, and did I want to keep doing this the way that I was doing it? Or again, was there something bigger that was calling me, a bigger purpose, and kind of what that next season of my life was going to look like?
Yeah, I don't think there's ever or for typically there's not a one thing happened and then I decided to change, like to make a hard course change. And it's interesting, 'cause, at least at face value for you, it's like, yeah, I was doing one very meaningful job and then it shifted to another one. So, but it sounds almost like from what you said, maybe there was some quality of life stuff that you weren't happy with.
Yeah, I mean, I started to notice it was really hard for me to wake up and be excited to go to the job. So I started feeling a lot of burnout, a lot of compassion fatigue, a lot of questioning around, is this what I got into this work to do? Or that question around, is this what I want to keep doing for the next 10 plus years? And so I think that's the point that I hit of I started to see a lot of changes in my own health, like physical health, start to change. I started to notice relationships were being impacted and my behavior around that of, coming home and my husband being like, "Why are you so why are you being so mean to me? Like, why are you so angry?" And I'm like, "I don't know. This isn't normal. Like, this is how everybody is." And so a lot of those things of where I lost a lot of like that spark you have at the beginning. And I think I'm a very strong empath as is. And so I started to really absorb everything. And it became very, very heavy. And I didn't have a good way to offload a lot of that stuff. It was just kind of that shove it down, deal with it later. Or you shouldn't be feeling this way, that whole dialogue we have in our head. that it just stacked up over time. And so when I think one of the biggest things that I saw was my physical health. When a lot of that started to change and I started to see a ton more inflammation, a ton more results of chronic stress, some of the bigger stuff showing up, that's when I was like, I think I need to pay attention and I think I need to listen because going down the same road in the way I was doing it was not going to lead me to a pleasant path. And or that's why we see so many people end up getting hurt at some point anyways, or all these chronic illnesses, autoimmune stuff showing up is because we don't listen very well. And so those were kind of some big things. um the other thing I remember very clearly, a lieutenant of mine having a conversation with me. He recognized how frustrated, how burned out I was, and he told me straight up, he's like, if something doesn't change in you, like you're not gonna make it. And that was it. It's always hard when someone, paints the picture back for you and you have to really sit with this as now it's no longer just an internal dialogue for myself. Exterior is showing the same thing that I'm feeling on the inside, and that's hard when someone calls you out like that. And so those a few of those conversations and a little bit more of everything together, I think is what led me to where I was. And also on the other positive side though is after grad school and when I was in my internship is I got really, really busy, started to get very busy on the mental health side. And so I had this big draw, this call, this passion of I'm doing this other kind of work now that's incredibly rewarding. It's such a blessing. It's so different in a way. That was growing fast as well. And so I was having to make the decision around you can't do both things. You can't work 48 hours and then go see, mental health clients for 4 days till you go back on shift again. That's not going to work. Further
Oh, so you were
burnout.
in school while you were a firefighter.
Yes. Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I did it all. Yes. I'm one of those gluttons for punishment.
Well, yeah,
So,
now it makes sense. If you're already an empath and you're always interacting with people on the worst day of their lives, and then you have another full-time gig essentially grinding it out at school, that kind of adds up a little bit more. Because I was wondering, like, obviously I get it's a very physical job and very demanding, but like what was it that was driving that there? But that makes a lot of sense.
mhm. Yeah, definitely more the mental side, I would say. Like physically, I was doing the job just fine, like that kind of thing. But also dealing with like chronic inflammation all the time and autoimmune markers starting to show up and things like that. So it wasn't necessarily just the physical side, it was a mental side. So and I just didn't wanna go somewhere where, like, the feeling of waking up and not being excited to do what you're doing is not a fun feeling, and so that was really a big decision point for me and part of my journey, and I've, accepted it, and I'm so grateful for it. I had an amazing career. I wouldn't take any of it back, but I'm very glad to be in the place where I am now.
What was there, was it maybe the increased absorption that you have for other people's pain that was sucking the enjoyment out of it? Do you even
I think
know?
there Yeah, I think there was a level of that you have to disconnect yourself from your humanity to be able to survive. So that became a survival tactic, which is very hard for an empath or somebody that feels things to do that in the first place. But when you start to do that repetitively over time, then you start to lose touch with humanity in general. So now you stop seeing people as people, like it's just a call, like you everything becomes so functional rather than relational that's I didn't like that. And that was what I felt myself slipping into that very heavily is not seeing people as humans anymore and being disconnected from your humanity. And like I said, part of that's that survival tactic because you have to in a way. Otherwise, it'll be so overwhelming everything that you see or everything you have to deal with. Everybody's worst day, like to fully be immersed in that and to allow yourself to feel everything is can be incredibly overwhelming or not sustainable if you're not doing it in the correct way. So I think that was part of the toll that started to hit me too, is that mentality of just, keep grinding through, that don't let the stuff impact you, don't let, death impact you, or a lot of the terrible things that you get in the middle of. Or, I mean, just, running the same call on the same homeless person over and over again, those kinds of things, like that, all that impacts you on some level. And to just shut all of that off, that takes a price tag with it. So that's where I think that comes from.
And that's tough because you have to be able to do that while you're doing the job. Like that is necessary, but I think you see that in the military where as well, and police officers where the problem is when you shut it off, you don't allow yourself to turn it back on when it's time to process. And so the processing never gets done on the back end. And I'm guessing you've probably seen that. Having the education behind, the mental health education behind all of that as you're dealing with all of this, it's probably been an interesting thing to be able to pick yourself apart a little bit.
Oh, yeah, and you mentioned early on, talking a little bit about, like, the ketamine-assisted work and the psychedelic stuff. Is in my very first ketamine session that I did, or the like, I was actually the person doing the ketamine, is I was walking through the graveyard with thousands of graves, and some had names, some had faces, and the Grim Reaper was there with me, and we're walking through this graveyard, and I had, several people who a lot of people who I've known who have killed themselves, or terrible pediatric calls with kids involved, or just so much death. And essentially, we're walking through this, like, not pleasant graveyard towards this huge, like, beam of light. And when we get there, the Grim Reaper, he goes, You've got to let this go. Like, you've got to let these souls, these people be at peace. Like, you did everything you could for them, but you cannot carry this anymore. And that was so profound for me. And that was all still while I was online. So I got to actually, like, really shift things towards the end, or do some things differently.
Mhm.
But it made me very cognizant around, how do I handle these kinds of calls, or how do I handle calls in general, so that I'm not subconsciously carrying everything with me, because I was. And you don't realize it because it's just so common. It's just another day at work. But in the terms of the subconscious and the level of the body, is where everything was imprinted, everything was remembered. And so that was a huge wake up call for me, is I have to start doing things differently, because that was, 9, 8, 9 years worth of calls. Who would have even been able to know what 20 years worth of calls would have been like? Just
Yeah.
that scorecard, it becomes so huge.
Mm. Is there a big especially military, or at least obviously I was only in the Marines, so I can only speak to what a Marine grunt unit is like, but there's a very big let's shut up and drink thing, which is it's part of it's camaraderie, part of it is, but there's also it gets in the I guess I feel like that if you're already stuffing stuff down and then you get into that, like I mean for me, that's I leaned into that, and that's not saying anything bad about the Marine Corps. Obviously, I made my decisions on things, but I leaned into this. Things are good. I'm gonna keep drinking away and doing acting like things are good. Is that a very similar culture like in with firefighters when you guys come off of shift, or obviously you're not boozing while you're at the fire station on for however many days you're there, but is there still like that backside kind of party culture?
Oh, absolutely, there is. I think it's kind of sad and funny at times. We joke about this, especially with people. I work with a lot of people who have underlying substance use issues, especially as a former military, or current, or first responder. And it's almost so normal for the culture, you don't even realize that it is. Like, you're the odd one if you're not in the middle of the behavior, if you're not drinking, or you don't go out and have drinks, or whatever, like that is you're the odd one out. It's that prevalent. And it's so every, celebration or event is centered around alcohol. And it's unbelievable how many people, end up getting DUIs, or like some even end up going to, inpatient or outpatient programs. But there's a lot of people who, like, it's teetering that line of like, okay, now you're actually getting DUIs, things are happening, or you're going through withdrawals if you're not drinking enough frequently enough. That it's a massive issue, and I
Yeah.
think it's very under, uh, or it's just normalized. Of like, I've had some military guys on my podcast too talk about going home and drinking like a pint of whatever was normal every single day, like
I
just
was about
to
to say a pint isn't jack. Like that's small. Those are small numbers, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
but every day is it, and you just don't realize it becomes, again, so normalized that you don't even realize that's not normal anymore. But it's
Yeah.
all about covering up. It's a coping strategy for covering stuff up, for getting your nervous system to shut up for a little while, like, all the things that we're using it for. It's just the legal easiest one to get, I guess. But everybody has something, whether it's, alcohol, sex, drugs, or rock and roll. Like, everybody
Food.
has something. Yeah.
Food is a
Oh,
big
food,
one in
absolutely.
America that no one talks
Yeah.
about because then you're fat shaming people. It's like we're we're still allowed to talk about this. This is an addiction. It's I don't
Yeah.
know why people tiptoe around that, but it absolutely is. Yeah, it's I think in general it's because I was a functional alcoholic for a hot minute after I got out of the Marines, and like I really I think there's a lot more, even like just in general, out of the entire population, a lot more people that are riding that functioning line than we realize. And where they don't realize it either. It's
Mhm.
just, yeah, it's interesting. And I've wondered as some of these plant medicines start to, in the next 10, 15 years, as they start to really spread in our society, as I expect they will, if that some of that stuff starts to change. But I don't because I know supposedly, current like Gen Z, I believe, is drinking less than any generation before them. Like it seems to be, I don't know how much of that is okay, yes, but we're abusing other substances still. So
Mhm.
it's, not necessarily pointing to the fact that some increased awareness has arisen around maybe the impacts of alcohol when it's used in less than just or in more so than a social environment. But I think it'll be interesting to see. But with you, really getting into the hypnotherapy stuff. I mean, is where's the best place to start? I know you do clinical hypnotherapy. I guess. Oh, because I'm curious on one hand, how much of hypnotherapy in general is entirely dependent on on the individual's suggestibility. Like is everyone a potential candidate for hypnotherapy, or do you kind of have to suss out if a person, I don't know if manipulated is the right way, but if a person can be manipulated into that state?
So I think statistically, they say like 90% of all people are hypnotizable if
Mhm.
you're looking at data and statistics. It really depends upon the hypnotherapist or who you're working with, but it's amazing how little that you actually need to be able to hypnotize people. And it's just like if you're coming in to do any kind of therapeutic work, you have to have a level of willingness. And that's even just making the phone call or going to the website or walking through the door, logging on for your session, whatever that looks like. All you need is that little bit, that seed of willingness, and that will be more than enough to get you where you need to go. Uh, I personally haven't had any issues with people in hypnosis. What's really fun though is when people come back and they're like, I don't know if it's working, or I don't know if, I'm like, well, for one, are you doing the things that you're supposed to do? And two, like, do you believe that it can work, that it can, like, you can change. And it's another really, like, sticking point for us to work through therapeutically or even coaching wise, because if you don't believe you can change, or you don't do what you need to do, there's what I call the secondary gain, which is what you get out of having your problem. So if that's strong enough, like, if that is big enough, that will almost self-sabotage you. So those are all things that we look at in layers that we work through, because we have to see, like, what's the payoff of your depression? What's the payoff of your anxiety right now? What's the payoff of you drinking alcohol? All of those kinds of things we have to look at, because sometimes it's just those little things that end up being really powerful shifters for people. But it's hypnosis in general is not mind control, and it's not the people always ask, "Are you gonna make me bark like a dog, or, do something stupid or say something stupid?" It's like, I can't make you do anything that you don't want to do. There isn't that level of control in that way. If I told you to go out and eat 5 Big Macs and you're like, "That sounds freaking disgusting. I'm not gonna do that." Yeah, I can't make you do that. You have to want to do the things. So that's
I
why I talk
mean,
about the willingness. Yeah.
you just told me that you made your husband put up a wire fence, like, right before we started recording.
We agreed to it. We did
Yeah,
it collaboratively, so we needed to, so but yeah, I wish that's not that easy. That would be cool if it was,
that
but
would be sweet.
no,
But
it's yeah, it's not mind control in that way. You're actually when when you're in hypnosis, you are fully conscious and you're fully in control the entire time. So you're not sleeping, you're not like it that's some of the myths and misconceptions around, like, what hypnosis actually is. So I'm glad that we're talking about it, because I like to bring a lot of information to it, because it's a really super powerful modality. Literally the one that changed my life the most out of plant medicines, out of other psychedelics, out of everything. Hypnosis for sure was the biggest, like, crazy, like, wrecking bomb in my whole life of looking at everything, so
before, because I get always a million questions open up with this stuff, but before we move further into that, I just want to clarify, the idea of the payoffs that you were talking about and identifying someone being open to change or believing that they can change. I mean, that's not, I want to make sure I'm on the same page as you. That's not unique to hypnotherapy. That is therapy in general, right?
oh, absolutely, that's
Okay.
anything in general.
Yeah.
That's anything, even just your own belief in yourself. That's like, you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe you can do anything,
And actually want it.
that yeah, and want it, and that
Yeah.
yeah, that's universal, not just with therapy, that's with anything.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something with that. But
No.
with I guess because you are coherent and fully conscious while that's going on, and maybe you can speak to this from a personal circuit or from a personal perspective and the hypnotherapist perspective, is the power of that modality the fact that I mean, you're almost doing a dance there, right? If you're aware of what's happening and you're kind of letting it happen to yourself, is that because you're almost it's like the client is handing over driving to someone else?
Well, let me give you some framework to help explain it, and then it'll bring it all together, because it's a really good question you bring up. So when we look at hypnosis, it's a very natural but altered state. So you go into hypnosis throughout the day during different points. You don't even realize that you're doing it, so subconscious. So when you talk about people being in the flow state, or when someone's driving and they go from point A to point B, and every turn, every stoplight, everything is so subconscious, you don't even really remember getting there. That's a level of hypnosis. So we're tapping into a different brainwave state. We're going into, like, our higher beta, into kind of past delta, more into theta brainwave states. So it's something you do all the time throughout the day. When it comes to the mind, we have three aspects of our mind. We have our conscious mind, which is obviously awake and conscious when we're awake and conscious. So it's taking in now 60,000 pieces of information each day, and it's trying to dwindle that down into what do we need to know? How do we, operate in this world? All those kinds of things. There's your subconscious mind, which is a lot of people refer to that as your heart mind. So it's where you hold all of your memories, your beliefs, your emotions, your perceptions. In the midst of the two of those is what we call the critical factor, and that's a fact checking gatekeeper. So what happens is your subconscious mind has been taking in information since before you were even born. So belief systems, and that's why we run into like epigenetic type things and generational trauma and stuff like that. Because you're literally being programmed, and your nervous system is being programmed before you're even born. So when there's new information that comes into the system, let's say like when someone's working with me and we're dealing maybe with like low self-esteem or self-value or worth, things around that. And we start to talk about how you are worthy, you are accepted, you are loved, you are important, all those things. The conscious mind says, heck yeah, like we love that. We want to believe that. That sounds amazing. But it hits the critical factor, and the critical factor says, like, "Time out, I'm gonna be right back. Let me check with the subconscious and see what our programming is, what we actually believe about ourselves." And if the subconscious mind says, "No, I believe that I'm bad, I'm a piece of shit, I'm not worth anything, I'm never gonna be able to do anything right, nothing ever works out for me," it's gonna reject all of those suggestions. So now a lot of that like positive affirmation work that we're trying to do isn't as effective because a lot of it's not even making it through. So through hypnosis, we're able to take the critical factor offline and work directly with the subconscious and the conscious mind. So like you mentioned, someone else goes into the driver's seat, but it's actually you staying in the driver's seat because your subconscious is going to kind of lead the show in terms of where we're going, where we're gonna stop, what we're gonna actually dig into, what layer of the onion is ready to be addressed. The hypnotherapist is this there as like the passenger in the front seat saying like, "Are you good? Do you need a drink? Do you want another bag of Skittles? Like, what are we doing?" Kind of thing. Is your subconscious is only gonna bring up the stuff in that moment, in that session that you're ready to address and handle, that layer of the onion essentially, like I like to look at it. So you're still fully in control. Nobody else is taking over control of your mind or taking you to a place that you're not ready to go or that your subconscious mind isn't going to go there. We're just there to support on the other side of it. But everything that comes up, just like with psychedelic work, everything that comes up is meant to come up, that there are no mistakes. Sometimes you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need. And so trusting your subconscious mind and trusting yourself is a huge part of the work as well as what comes up is coming up. So hopefully that kind of answers or clears up that question, but you're still definitely the one in the driver's seat.
That was the last part was such a therapist answer of there's whatever comes up is meant to come up and what doesn't is okay. Like
Yep.
it's yeah,
It's true though. It's true. I've had sat through plenty of psychedelic work with people and they're like, "That's not what I wanted to go over," or "Nothing about this ever came up." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, like that's not how this
Mm,
works. You don't get to choose it. Like whatever is ready to
yeah.
come up, it comes up for a reason. So you have to just let go and trust
Mm.
that. It's a process and it only gives you what you have capacity to handle, which is important too, is sometimes some of the big stuff or what would call quote unquote big stuff doesn't come up right away because you don't have enough capacity to handle it in the here and now. So it's very, very cool how our minds work for us and they like it really in our favor, but we just have to let go and trust that.
So how do you ride that line with regression? Because I know that you do some of that work and maybe also define what that is for people who aren't aware.
Sure, there's several different kinds of regression and it kind of depends on what people believe and what they're kind of dabbling into, but a lot of the regressions that I work with is going back to the where, when, and how a belief started to become true for you. So,
Mm.
if maybe it's the belief that I'm not lovable, okay, like we're gonna work with that and we're gonna figure out, based on what emotions come up around, they always manifest in issues you already are dealing with. So if it's relationships or gosh, it could be money or all kinds of things, is we dwindle it down to see what the emotions are and look for the belief. And then we use that to go back to the where, when, and how. So we have to find, it's usually a earlier sometimes it could be, 10 years or less in age, but I've seen it even play into your 20s, 30s, where some of these impactful moments or impactful relationships started to make you believe this thing about yourself. So that's where we go back and we deal with it in the here, in that moment, so much more resourced. You're going back as you, as this adult you, but we have to go back and rewire that belief so that it no longer exists as the way that you live your life. So that's where many people get stuck, is you're living under that old framework, that old belief system. I'm not lovable, and that impacts everything in your life. So we go back and fix it, work with it in that moment there, which the regressions are crazy powerful. Man, they can be hard. They're not always easy, I'm gonna say, but man, it's wild to see when people come out of it, or even myself, and I was like, I had no idea that's what made me feel this way, or that's what made me believe this. And if you would have never done the work around it, reframed it, you would just continue to live your entire life out of that belief system.
Can you give an example, I guess? What was so, because I mean, it sounds like these are formative experiences that have become foundational beliefs in your schema of yourself, and they bleed over into everything else. Like for you, because you've said hypnotherapy has been so big in your life, was there something specific that stands out?
So there was a regression that, well, I'll start from the beginning. So we went into the session with the goal of working on this, feeling confident, feeling empowered to show up. So like, being in the podcast world is like to put yourself out there and to put your content out there and to not feel like you're selling yourself short or holding yourself back. So that was my intention going into this, is I want to be able to like show up, to not be worried about what other people are thinking of me and all of that kind of thing. That was my intention going into the session. So then the hypnotherapist who I was working with took me, into hypnosis, and we're doing our regression. And I actually went back to a middle school memory, a middle school moment I had just transferred schools. I was brand new, and like back then, or probably even now, I guess, most people grow up in the same school, so it's people know each other for a very long time. Well, I was the new kid on the block, and it I was always taller than everybody, including the boys. Like, I've always been super tall, so and middle school is just a terrible time for everybody.
Yeah.
But I was struggling so hard to fit in and be accepted. I just wanted to make friends. I just wanted to, feel like I belonged there. And this group of girls were just terrible. Like, they were just mean girls, as, junior high girls
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
But that time frame, not even just one single event, but those relationships with those girls impacted me to where I started to believe I can't be myself. I can't put myself out there. I need to worry about what other people are thinking of me. Like all of that. Don't be too loud. Don't like really be yourself. All of those things came from those middle school encounters with that group of girls. Now, how would I have ever been able to get down to that in regular talk therapy? I don't know, or I don't believe so, because I never did get there. I would have never known that that was what was causing the issue. So I needed to go back into that moment and to deal with that relationship. And you know the cool thing in regressions is you get to tell the people exactly what usually you want to tell them, but you never got the opportunity to. So I kind of like got to let these group of girls have it, and to tell them exactly how they made me feel. And then I got to totally work with that 12-year-old version of myself to empower her to feel confident and to remind her who she really is, and all of these really powerful things coming back to the truth of who we are. And I'm telling you, after that session, like, that clicked something different for me to where it was like, "Okay, there's a gift in being who I am. I get to show up, I get to take up space, I get to feel confident, empowered, all those things." And
Dunk a
it just
basketball.
yeah, dunk, like, be tall, all the things, and it just really changed a lot. So and honestly, I would say, oh man, probably 90% of a lot of people when we're doing this work, something comes up from that time frame of life, that middle school time frame. It's so influential in ways that there's
Yeah.
usually something that comes up. I often not surprised at all. So that's my personal example with it. I've had regressions where people have gone back to like less than a year old. They stuff came up, they could see things like, perfectly in the room that they were, but obviously pre-verbal, um, up to people, just a couple of years away from the age that they are now. So they it's just so wild, the time
Mhm.
frame of things that can be so impactful, but it's also regressions are really helpful at processing grief and loss as well too, where you get to kind of work through some of these really profound moments through life where we experience grief and loss in a totally different way. So regression can be used for a lot of different things, but definitely one of the most powerful forms of hypnosis. And very, very healing for the nervous system as well.
And so when like you said, you were able to go back and, basically say things to these girls that you never did, and even to yourself, does it feel like you're actually reliving that while you're doing it? Or is that an exercise that you're doing with the therapist while you're in that state?
It feels, well, it feels very real from a lot of levels. For one, it's kind of amazing to see like what your subconscious has taken an imprint of and remembers, so little details of things can be very surprising. I hear that a lot from people of like, "Wow, I didn't know it would be that clear, that vivid to see everything." Um, and the way that your body feels and the emotions that come along with it, I always tell people it would be very hard to fake that. The things that you feel are very, very real. And so you're feeling kind of all of that. When it comes to trauma, though, that a lot of people I mean, sometimes that's something we have to go back and address, something that's an open book that's causing issues. And it can be hard for people, but what we do, we have different techniques to, if it gets to be too much, too overwhelming, we can pull back a little bit. And we have techniques to allow people to be there in that moment without for sure re-traumatizing or kind of that feeling of, "Am I gonna be able to get through this?" Is like, you're absolutely going to get through it, and we have lots of different ways to help you do that.
But I'm asking, like, is it immersive, basically? When you're revisiting that, is that like for you, was that an immersive sensory wise? It does it feel like you're there again?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it feels like you're there. I sometimes, though, it doesn't always it can feel a little bit like a third party experience too, though. Like you're
Mhm.
watching it, like a similar like in some of the psychedelic work as well, like you're kind of a third party or watching things like on a movie screen type thing. But you're feeling everything. Like sometimes though you can even your senses come online so you can start to smell things, like yeah, the temperature changes, you can feel things differently. Like those are or hear things, those are big indications too, but it's incredibly immersive of the experience that you're in.
It's so weird,
Mhm.
especially if it was from when, you're so little. Like, I'll be honest, I have a hard time believing that someone, when they're 1 year old, like that they're having a memory that's a real memory and not a, constructed memory that they believe is a memory. But let's assume if you are, or even if it's you as a toddler, like going back to that state with the actual, you don't have any grasp of anything. Even if you're 3 years old, like your ability to process anything, even outside of, single sentences, really, or, small clusters of sentences and not having the capacity to actually have any sort of larger thoughts around things and then going back to there as an adult has to be freaking weird. It
Mm-hmm.
has to be very,
Yeah.
very strange.
Yeah, it's definitely eye-opening, I think, and it's where I mean, as soon as before, like I mentioned, before you're even born, your nervous system is trying to figure out like how it survives in this world, and that builds your belief systems off of that. So, like, it's not uncommon at all. I mean, like, we do a ton of regressions with people, like I said, under the age of 10. So you're talking about these big formative years. And if a a caregiver or a teacher, a parent, a sibling, a group of friends, if something happened to where like that message got encoded into the system that, I'm not wanted or I'm not good
Mhm.
enough or that it can start even yeah, like I said before you're even born and then you keep experiencing that same scenario or that belief system continues to get stronger over time. So it's wild, even when you, as three, you wouldn't be able to process that kind of thing, but your nervous system is taking in that information and trying to figure out a framework of how do we survive? How do we stay alive? How do we, operate in this world? And if something happens, that changes the entire shift of the programming. So now, and then that leads to multiple different behaviors down the road, but they're always living under this framework that, I must have done something wrong. They don't love me. And then everything goes from there. So it's so wild. It's hard to explain it. It's just very wild. But
Do,
once you do it, you see how profound it really is.
do we know for a fact? Because I know there's been studies on, a fetus hearing its mom's voice or different music that it listens to and stuff. But in terms of, I guess, do we know to what extent that kind of how much of an effect those things have? Like, I guess in terms of it potentially causing something so drastic that it's something that someone has to address in therapy as an adult like this.
Oh, absolutely. It goes down and well, I mean, generational trauma can show up at any point, and they've shown now it's actually encoded in people's DNA. So the nervous system and the belief systems of your parents directly impact you. And you see this a lot too of how what your parents believed about themselves, like all of that data gets encoded within you as well and how they felt about you being born, coming into this world can have a really huge impact as well. So if your parents were financially struggling or maybe they were done having kids or they wanted you to be a boy and you were a girl, like all of those thoughts, those beliefs, that starts to imprint into your own programming and your own nervous system. And again, the studies are showing like this is happening from the DNA level. So
It's
you're being
actually
born.
affecting gene expression.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're
Wow.
being born with this already pre-programmed set of beliefs, that I'm a burden or I'm not good enough. All so it is wild to see just how impactful it is. Even with so another like because I like to give some of the personal side of things because then it makes it real and people can relate to that instead of a lot of mumbo jumbo. But for me, working through one of the big things that hypnosis brought up for me was my relationship to money. And I had to look at my entire belief system around what does money mean to me? What do I believe about all of that and really dismantling this scarcity mindset. Well, through hypnosis, coming back to the scarcity mindset didn't just start with me. That came from my parents because my parents, when they had me, they were both young, 19 and 21 years old, living in a trailer. Like they didn't have money, they didn't have the resources set up to have a kid. And all of that impacts the way that I viewed money, spent money, all those kinds of things as an adult. And so those are the things we have to go back and look at because all of that programming is affecting you in some way and showing up in your life. So it's crazy. It's just so fascinating. I love it because it's just the coolest thing to look at.
Yeah, well, and even as a small child, like you're still in that environment, and whether you're fully keying in on everything that's going on, like kids understand things more than we realize. Maybe not in the way that we understand them, but they pick up on stuff like that, that there's tension around the money and the food or whatever.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
so interesting. And so it and it seems like this is almost the hypnotherapy is a tool to have in your toolbox as you're working with a client, as opposed to, okay, we're gonna, come at this, what we're gonna put you through CBT. Instead, this is a tool in a toolbox that you have as you're working with the client, as opposed to we're just doing hypnotherapy for X amount of sessions. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
I think it's well, it's moved into probably for me one of the most primary modalities because what I was running into early on in my internship and early in my practice was the people kept coming back with the same problem. So, the same anxiety, the same, fear, the same depression, like the same relationship stuff, whatever it was, is like we're still talking about the same stuff through each session, or we kept seeing the same patterns show up. And I was kind of like, okay, there's got to be a different way to look at this because
Hmm.
not every and that I was already immersed in the psychedelic world anyways, but not everybody that's not their thing or they don't want to. And there's a lot that goes into that too. So you can't just like one off decide we're going to do this modality tomorrow. There's a lot of planning that goes into it. So I really wanted to find something that helped support my practice in a way of getting into the roots of things, the deeper work, because I know that the deeper work is what leads to the symptoms, the emotions, the behaviors, anyways. And so the very first time I ever experienced hypnosis was when I was in fire academy. They had sent me to do some work with a therapist who used hypnosis as a modality, and we did work around, confined spaces, which was actually like a stress trauma response that I was experiencing. So I knew that it worked because it helped me immensely to do what I needed to do. But I really found that, I just put it out there and was like, okay, I need something else, something that gets me to the deeper level. And it was kind of like one of those profound messages that came through that was like, "Hypnosis, that's go hypnosis." So I found, an amazing school and program. I wanted to get very, very thoroughly trained because there are some, like, crazy weekend workshops out there, which I just don't believe if you're gonna be working in someone's subconscious mind that you would just need, 48 hours of training and call it good. So I
Hmm.
wanted it very, very thorough, and so my school was, like, over 5,000 hours and 9 months long to go through
It's like
it.
a real therapy, like a actual counseling certification almost, like
It
to the
was
level of,
massive, yeah.
wow.
But I wanted it to be that way because I
Yeah.
take my work very seriously, so I wanted to get very, very thoroughly trained, and little did I know in the midst of my own training, it's what I call the great dismantling for myself as you are going through it at the same time you're learning it, and so here's where I'm dealing with this all these beliefs that had been under the surface or how I'd been living my life for, 37 plus years and deciding, do I still want to believe this about myself? Do I still want to live this way? Or is this no longer serving me anymore? Never has. And so that doing all of that work in the midst of it is a lot to say, but it's been so awesome. And that's why most people, we do some form of hypnosis when I work with them because it just works so effectively and so fast. And it allows us to work with the nervous system at the same time, which is a huge missing link in traditional methods. So, yes, long story short, it is a tool. Again, not everybody does it, but I would say pretty much everybody I work with, we do it. And it's been really, really helpful to have in my toolbox to get, especially when people come and they're like, I just feel very stuck. I've been working on this for a long time, or I can't get through this behavior. Uh, that kind of stuff is where hypnosis works incredibly well.
So at what point is it, okay, this is an appropriate time for, instead of talk therapy today, we're going to do hypnotherapy? Or am I getting that wrong, and how the structuring typically goes?
So typically, when I meet somebody, first off, I just start to listen to them and I start to listen to how they talk about themselves, how other people talk about themselves, what they see coming up in their life. And I can usually start to hear a lot of their belief system come up. So, things around, things never work out for me, or I can't do this, or I'm afraid to do this, um, inadequate, all this stuff. I just listen and dig out some of these beliefs that I hear. Once I have some of that information, which is usually done in the first, sometimes even in the consult, I start to hear things about how people speak about themselves. And then that gives us an idea of, okay, here's some ways that we can handle this. We can definitely stick to more of the traditional work, which will still always include the nervous system because that's my cup of tea. I will not work with the mind without working with the body at the same time. We have to do both. But most people, I think nowadays too, they come to me specifically for hypnotherapy. But I kind of explain to them, here's what we can do. Here's some different avenues that we can take. But if you really, really want to get into the deeper work, which is the work that I do, we have to use some different tools and leaning into hypnosis for that. And then typically the next session is when we would start that because those are usually 2-hour sessions. And we start off, working you through and getting used to hypnosis, so that you feel confident going into it and you're more familiar with it because a lot of people just don't know what to expect. So
Yeah.
we have to get the first one kind of out of the way so you can kind of see, oh, okay, this is what it's like. There's nothing to be afraid of, all those kinds of things in the first session. And then we typically work from there. I take the method of cleaning house because I'm like, once you go into this work, you want to look for all the dust bunnies that are hiding under things and you want to clear those out because the less buttons you have, the less buttons there are for things externally to get pushed. So
So when you're talking about working with the body, what do you mean? And why is it this non-negotiable with you? Like if you're going to work someone with someone, why and how are you doing it?
one of the biggest shifters for me was looking at the nervous system. And it was never anything that I learned, definitely not growing up. And I didn't honestly learn it very well, if at all, going through, traditional master's work. When I came across neurosomatics specifically, I'm always a try the Kool-Aid before you buy it type of consumer. So before I would do any training or any modality, I'd always want to try it for myself first. And when I found neurosomatics and I started to do the work with that, it was like a floodgate opened in a totally different way of looking and understanding myself. So we've all heard of, fight and flight. And now most people have heard of like freeze and fawn or sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system. And of course, my medic background like really soaked all this up because I love the
It's bread and
medicine in the
butter.
body.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I was like, what does this actually mean? This, sympathetic state, and how do we see this play out? But understanding from the nervous system side of like, oh, my perfectionism is a nervous system state of being in flight. It's a stress state, or my hypervigilance, or my inability to rest, or my disassociation. All of those things are things coming from the nervous system for a reason. And I've never been in any therapist's office that ever really talked to me about that kind of stuff. It was always like, "Well, why are your perfectionism? Oh, you just love control." Okay, well, that's not like super helpful. to understand. But when I started to look at it from the nervous system side and again went and did the full training and everything, that really shifted things for me to understand I it's not just about being in control. It's my nervous system trying to stay safe in an environment because it's under threat prediction all the time. So like you know this like I did in my career, it was all about threat prediction and hypervigilance and needing to be aware all the time, but your nervous system doesn't know time, place, or event. So you can't come home and be at the gas station and know differently from being deployed somewhere. Or like me, I can't be in a movie theater and not feel hypervigilant to look around for all the emergency exits. Those kinds of things are coming from the nervous system, from those survival mechanisms, those patterns. And that's where we have to do the work as well, because what happens when a lot of people are doing these big shifts and these moves in their mind and processing stuff, the nervous system is always going to go back to the default mode network. We've all heard that term thrown out there. The default way of doing things because it's literally wired into your brain, it's wired into your nervous system. This is how we always do things. This is how we stay safe. This is how we survive. So we have to, using neuroplasticity, create those new neural pathways and those new ways of doing things so that the nervous system doesn't go back into the default way. Teaching people, helping people master their nervous system to be more regulated, to go to the gas station and not get activated, or to be in a conversation and not go into a threat response of fight or flight, or to not be in sympathetic nervous system all the time and then come home and totally dump into numbing, isolating, doom scrolling because your nervous system is trying to downregulate. All of those kinds of things, even people pleasing, like all of those behaviors is what we look at in the nervous system. And that's where I help people work with their nervous system as we create these new belief systems and these new patterns so that we're creating a new default mode network.
I mean, I obviously see the need for that with, someone who's been to combat or someone who was in your profession or a cop or someone who's been through something. I hesitate to use the word traumatic because I feel like the word traumatic is greatly overused today. And this is almost what I'm getting at with this, or what I'm going to ask with this as well, is then when we make it where, I guess, isn't assigning someone's like people pleasing or their perfectionism to being a fight or flight response a little exaggerated, or am I reading too far into that? And I guess I have a very big bias again towards, I feel like everything these days is trauma. Everything these days, even if it's a healthy stressor, is this gets it in our society. There's a leaning towards over over us, I guess overvaluing isn't even the right term there. Like magnifying those things out of proportion, I guess it would be more accurate. So is that literally, does some of this work, up the nervous system work, apply to something as small as people pleasing? And is that, I guess, are they actually running on the same systems? Is there science backing that is actually what's at play there?
Yeah, so if we look at the brain, like the when we're in a nervous system regulated state, we're in our prefrontal cortex, which is our logical, our reasoning, our emotionally regulated state, problem solving part of the brain. It's in the front part of our brain. That's ideally where we want to be most of the time. But what happens when we experience a stress response or trauma response, but even when we just feel threatened in some way, we go back into the oblongata, which is our lizard brain. That's the back part of our brain that's very close to our brain stem. That part of our brain is very primal. It's all about safety and survival. Anything that is considered a priority for that part of the brain is all about how do we stay alive. it doesn't have the ability to problem solve or to communicate or to stay emotionally regulated or any of those kinds of things. It
Mhm.
literally only cares about staying alive. And that's like literally how our brain is wired with our nervous system. So what happens when, let's say, even when you're in a conversation with somebody and let's say you pick up on some nonverbal body language or their face does something or their voice of tone. Well, if depending on what you've experienced so far or what's been imprinted into your nervous system, if that was considered a threat or some kind of stressful state, you're already going to jump back into your obligato. So now we're going back into the lizard brain, the lizard with the panic button saying, do something now because, like, that something needs to happen. Then from there, we go into those states of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So fawning is that um, trying to befriend the threat, trying to, make things okay. I'll take care of everyone else. I'll be the people pleaser, that lack of boundaries, because that mitigated the threat at the time. That's what the nervous system learned to do. And so that's where the people pleasing part that you're talking about comes into play is that's a triggered response that comes from some kind of programming that the nervous system picked up of we need to do this, we need to take care of everyone else. We need to always say yes, like all those kinds of things. That's what kept us alive. That's what kept us safe. And so that's what it knows to do. It's very well practiced. And so that's the physiological side behind it. The neuroscience side is it's a pre-programmed response for
Mhm.
whatever reason. That's where a lot of this is coming from of it doesn't always necessarily have to be the big traumas or the big stressors. It's just those little things over time that the nervous system decided and took in that info to say this is how we do things. So we need to be always paying attention of how we stay alive. That's the brain's job. Essentially,
Mhm.
how do we breathe and stay alive? And so it's
Yeah.
taking in all that information and comparing it back to the playbook that we have of the past. This happened this last time. I'm recognizing some patterns, so triggering into a response from there. Does that help like answer your question or make sense that way?
Yes. And when you brought it back to like the fawning, I'm like, okay, yes, you've been in a abusive relationship for years and that was your survival mechanism because you have kids and you didn't want to leave the relationship and you've learned, drawing it back to like something bigger like that and then breaking it back down made more sense with
Good.
then you get
Yeah.
conditioned to it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that stuff that totally makes sense. And side note, because I've always wondered this and I've apparently never thought to Google it. Do you know obviously the lizard brain is something everyone throws out there. Do you know like why we call it the lizard brain? Is that
Just because it's so primal. Like,
okay?
if you think about, like, well, like, literally thinking about a lizard, all it cares
Yeah.
about is how it stays alive,
I just
Like, how I eat, how
yeah.
I run away from the bigger lizard that's gonna eat me, the
Yeah.
kind of scenario. It's incredibly primal. That's where I think the lizard brain comes from is because the lizard
Yeah.
brain probably isn't worried about being emotionally regulated. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have that kind of brain power.
I always wondered because I know they think we descended from a shrew way, way, way back, and I was like, that's not a lizard though. So I don't know. I've always squirrel, but
Yeah. People
yeah,
call it sometimes like the mammalian brain. I've heard that too. It's just like thinking of it very practically,
just the
safety
base.
and survival. How do you stay alive? Basic needs.
Yeah. So I feel like I mean, I could ask endless questions about the hypnotherapy stuff, but I want to make sure we have time to cover some of this other stuff too. So, I guess sticking with the body before we move into some of the psychedelic assisted stuff, as you're trying to basically decondition people or condition them to a more appropriate state with these associations that their brain has formed, how like what is it drawing awareness to these things, these cognitive distortions that are going on and trying to make them aware of them, and through their own awareness you're trying to make these shifts?
It's a little bit of blending all of that together. So awareness is the first step because again, like a lot of these behaviors become so practiced and so subconscious, you don't even notice that they're happening. And they're very, very well ingrained. So starting to get people to pull back a little bit and looking at the behavior and asking the question, why? Why do I feel like the towels need to be folded this way? Or why do I feel like I can't, go to a restaurant and sit with my back towards the door? Like questions like that of starting to get very curious and asking why begins the process of understanding, because if we can't see it, we can't do anything with it. And so you got to be able to see it, see what's going on, why you're, immediately reacting this way in, a conversation, or you're feeling, like you can't rest or that kind of stuff. We have to look at the why first, and then we can start to break it down to, okay, what's the behavior going along with the emotion that's going along with the belief system. So that's the method to the magic, is figuring out, kind of trailing it all the way back to what's happening now, what are the emotions, and that sometimes takes work too, because a lot of people, we push down emotions, we don't like them, we never been taught how to do emotions, we don't even like the word, all those things we
There's a lot
have
of
to work
baggage with
with.
that. Yeah.
There's a lot, and there's just a lot of misunderstanding around good and bad emotions and all this stuff. Is we gotta be okay with them just being messengers and chemical reactions of the body. There is no good or bad. They're all here for a reason, but how we do this emotion game, we have to work with that, because you have to have an open heart to this as well, to allow yourself to feel emotions, and then tap into the belief systems after that. So looking at, okay, this belief system actually equals this nervous system response, and now we're connecting the dots all together. So I do a lot of work with giving people nervous system drills to do, because again, the more you can see your nervous system working for you and how you master your nervous system is really empowering, because now you don't feel like you're out of control or you can't do anything with this. Is they help people realize you can be as regulated as you want to be, even in an incredibly dysregulated situation. And our nervous systems all impact one another. So if you're more regulated in this dysregulated environment, you're going to have a positive impact on everybody around you. So giving people drills and helping them, again, to actually feel things coming up in their body, and what does this feel like? A lot of messages that we've muted for our lives, it's getting to know a lot of those things. So it's connecting all of the dots and bringing everything together into synthesis as we're doing the work.
And what's cool about those skills is that transfers to other things. Like it's that when you start to pay attention to those things, and I've noticed this through having been through therapy. Like I really feel like I was taught a more structured way to think about things that we've never been taught to think about. Like we get taught information growing up, but you don't actually get it's like another life skill that we're actually analyzing things and how to go about analyzing and actually understanding why you feel a way about a thing, whether that be, a belief that you have that's, and again, it doesn't have to be in and I'm working on myself context, but it can be okay, why do I react this way to these kinds of things? And why do politics always get under my skin? Why specifically that, or what this angle of these things? I think that's a very, I don't know. I feel like that's a missing thing from our education system. And I don't know if that's like something we could fit into high schools or if that would be a good entry level college type of course where it's like, okay, let's have a class on just how to draw that awareness inward onto something and actually pick apart why it is that you feel that way.
hmm I think it would be good to start like as early on as you could, because even when you look at kids, like when a kid throws a temper tantrum, they're kicking their legs, they're moving their arms, they're yelling often. And what usually happens is somebody tells them, like, stop doing that. Like, you're embarrassing me, or, you can't act like that. But what's happening, their body is trying to move that emotion of whatever it is, frustration or anger or sadness. their body is trying to help them move that energy, that emotion, and then we're telling them not to do that. And then that's where some of this disconnect comes in as well of like, well, we've learned a lot over time, not to have any kind of reaction to things or understand why we're feeling this way and what to do with it. So when you teach people, with anger is it just needs to move. Like you don't need to push it down, you don't need to repress it, but you don't need to act on it. Just let it move, and whether that's going for a walk or that's, put it splashing some cold water on your face or going out and laying in the grass, things like that is things we could all stand to learn that would help it
Mhm.
us again understand the emotions that are coming up, but then what to do with it instead of just pushing them down or again acting on it, which is the two things not to do when it comes to emotions. But it would be so cool if people could you could understand that, and you could then that helps people be able to talk about it, because that's the other disconnect is people don't even know what they're feeling. So then their spouses or their partners get pissed off at them because they don't ever talk about their emotions, but then it's like asking somebody to speak Chinese. They don't even know what they're
Yeah.
feeling or how to explain it. So I
Oh,
think you're right. If we change the framework early on, that would probably be awesome. But we got to do the work here and now. So,
yeah. Well, on the other side of that is it's very uncomfortable. So people also will hedge away from that, which is that's not some. I mean, I think it gets easier if it's like anything else. If you've done it more, you become more accustomed to that. But like that discomfort doesn't feel good, and we avoid it.
yeah.
That's a self-awareness thing that kind of you just have to be cognizant of. But
Yeah.
I'm guessing, this is. I would imagine that these, because you work specifically with ketamine, correct, in your practice?
Yes, I work with ketamine.
I'm guessing that probably erodes or at least alters some of these barriers.
Yeah, well, here in Colorado, like they've opened the door to a lot of different psychedelic work. So it's been cool to learn, and I've gone and done training in all the different methods of it. So it's cool to understand what each one does because they're all so different. But with ketamine specifically, uh, it's by nature a disassociative, and it's not necessarily a classic psychedelic in that not everybody gets the visuals that people assume you do off of psychedelics. Ketamine is I've had people go through ketamine sessions where it's just all dark and you're just feeling a bunch of emotions and thoughts are coming up and stuff like that. So it's not like psilocybin or LSD, the classic, quote unquote, classic ones where
Mhm.
you're gonna get visuals off of them. But it's really helpful to give people that third party experience to things and to give them a little bit of distance and space to work through stuff. I found that it's helpful, similar to hypnosis, of getting people that movement out of places where they feel stuck, or to also kind of hit the control alt delete reset. So it really helps with the neuroplasticity side of things, like we've been talking about. Of I explain it like if there's a hill that's covered with snow and a bunch of sleds have gone down in those well-worn pathways. Those are those default ways of doing things. Those get very well established, very well trained, and it's very hard on your own to not move outside of those behaviors or to stick with it. So, ketamine and psychedelics are like 6 feet of fresh snow on that hill, and now we have this new amazing canvas to work with. And that's part of what ketamine does, I think that's helpful. It's shorter sessions, so usually it's a couple hours, versus some of the other longer psychedelic medicines that are out there, but really helpful for a lot of different things, helpful for depression, helpful for anxiety. I think some people are even using it a lot for suicidal ideation as well. So, but it's a really interesting because I never use it until in this form until I was in the mental health side. I always use it on the
You're
ambulance for
plugging
other
people with
reasons.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, this is wild. um, that this is like a treatment.
Yeah.
But it's really been awesome. So it's a cool medicine to work with.
Is it an IV that you're hooking up to? Because you said these sessions are still a couple hours. I mean, how I'm so curious about how that plays out. Like, is this, yeah, can you speak through that? Because I'm also curious on the other end of, as a clinician and with the state opening up around this stuff. I mean, is there still, I guess, what have the complications been of integrating that into your practice, just as as an entrepreneur and a clinician as well?
So there's different routes that the treatment can be done. I use troches. So if somebody comes to me for ketamine work, this is somewhere that I'm, like, very, very stickler about that not everybody is on board with, but that's okay. I do extensive preparation with people before we go into any medicine session. So we're doing a lot of work leading into the session itself to prepare you and to help, like, get you ready essentially to go into your actual medicine session. We have to work again with the nervous system first. We have to work with that being able to let go of control. A lot of things go into the preparation side before we ever do any kind of medicine session. I do, and then you have to go through a medical eval too. So you meet with a prescriber to do, the whole medical side to make sure that everything is good. And then you get a prescription for it. So I do the troches. So those are lozenges that people swish in their mouth and then they can either spit it out or swallow it. There are places, clinics, or other medical providers that will do the IV or the IM, like a shot route to it. There's also some clinics that do like an intranasal option, like a spray as well.
Mhm.
So it kind of depends on what the clinic does and what their capacities are to do. But I would stick with the troches. That's what I've done historically. So that's the method that I like. And I think it works really well to do that. Um, and yeah, like I said, you have to go through the medical eval side of it as well. And typically, I'll do when I'm working with ketamine with somebody, we commit to 6 sessions because I found that usually one session isn't quite enough. You're going to need some stacked up over time to really get you through kind of what you're working on or to give you a good foundation moving forward. Because since they are shorter sessions, um, and every session, again, is so different, and you're gonna get what you get kinda
Mhm.
scenario, so I like 6 sessions works really, really well and, like, keeps a really nice window open for that neuroplasticity, so after the actual medicine session is an amazing time to work on these behaviors, things that you're wanting to change and shift and do, because you have those open neural pathways to be able to do that, so we do integration after each and every session too to take apart what came up in the session, how do we work with it, how do we move through and integrate it into life on the other side. So I take it pretty seriously. I do it very like kind of thorough job to it because I want to use the medicine responsibly. I think that's a huge thing with the psychedelic movement and the popularity and the accessibility is to make sure people are finding people who do it ethically and responsibly and they're set up well to do it so that you have a really amazing experience and outcome on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be, I'm sure there already are places that are almost like there were pill mills. I'm sure there's places that are doing the same thing with some of these medications, but and that will probably slow the progression in some of these areas in terms of places opening up to it, unfortunately, because there's always somebody. But the how different is it working with someone who's on ketamine as opposed to hypnotized? Because you said that sounded also pretty dissociative in the sense that that's how you're trying to access their subconscious mind.
So then hypnosis people are like I said conscious and they're usually uh there's dialogue and talking that's happening in the hypnosis side. In ketamine with usually the dosage, we go on the higher end of dosing. There you can do a lower dose and do more of a talking session, but I do the more on the medium to higher dose, and you're in the experience for just you. Like, we're not talking,
Oh.
we're not doing anything. I make playlists for everybody depending on what we're working on. You are in your journey until kind of the medicine wears off, and then we talk about it and kind of, like, go over things afterward. But there isn't a talking element to it when somebody's in a deeper psychedelic experience with ketamine. Yeah, it's just you're in your journey. So,
They're just going on a ride and you're there to make sure
yeah.
they're safe and then be there for them when they come out of it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and if
Wow.
anything comes up in it, if they need something, of course, that's what I'm there for too, or to help work things, but it's usually like, yeah, people are in it and then they come out of it. So, yeah, no talking usually.
Mm. How, and I mean, how long are they actually in the trip from it when your
It's
sessions?
it's dependent on the person, and it's dependent on the session. So how fast people metabolize the medication, what's on the docket for coming up material wise for them. It can be anywhere from, like 30 minutes to an hour to upwards of 2+ hours.
Damn.
And each session is totally different. So I always tell people that, like, don't think, oh, this is how it was the first time. This is how everything will be. It can be totally different every single time. So, but I always leave kind of that window open because we just don't know for sure how long the session's gonna be. So, but usually I haven't seen one that goes, at least for my with the trochees, I haven't seen one go above like 2.5 hours. I'm not the IV, I think as far as I know, they control the drip and the rate, and so I think you could be in it as long as you want to, or as
Mm.
long as you have medicine for, until you turn off the IV. So,
And in terms of your clients, I mean, whatever in terms of the experience they're going to get, they just get what they get, whatever comes up. Well,
yeah, we typically will talk about like an intention going into the session. So I like to use the mantras like help me, teach me, show me. So instead
mhm,
of like, I don't want to have, anger anymore, they like, how about show me how to be more at peace, or teach me to be more patient. Like,
mhm.
coming into the session with an intention kind of helps lay some groundwork, but it's also like, buying a ticket. You don't know where you're going, but you're getting on the plane, you strap in, and then you could tell the captain, like, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if we went, to the Bahamas?" And they'd be like, "That's great input, but, go ahead and just find your seat and buckle in," and then you just have to go with what's coming up. So, the people that try to control it or try to fight it, like, that's why we work so heavily on the front end of all this, to try to work on letting go more and feeling, safe enough to do that, because trying to control it is just not gonna get you anywhere with any
Yeah,
psychedelic. So you have to be willing to just let go and trust that exactly what came up was 100% what was supposed to, that there are no mistakes, like, there are no bad sessions. You get something out of everything.
there's your
But
therapist answer again.
I know, I'm very, well, therapist-y, so but that's true though, you
Yeah,
have to let
yeah,
go, so no expectations.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just teasing, but yeah, I don't know. Have you ever had someone go through one of those sessions and then it's like pretty clear, like, hey man, you've obviously been holding some stuff back quite in our sessions, huh? And
Yeah, it's when the sometimes the people who haven't cried yet, sometimes that'll be the the first session, or, yeah, it's just wild to see. I've had people, get pissed before because 'cause they're like, "This isn't what I wanted to come up," or, "I don't like what's coming up, make it in," and I'm like, "I told you, once you take it, there's no taking it back, like, you have
yeah,
to ride it out," like, but there's a lesson in everything. That's the beautiful part, is it's not just coming up for no reason. It's a teacher, and it's giving you a message, and then you hang up and you go do the work, like, that's the whole power in psychedelics. So but yeah, it's always interesting. Even in hypnosis, the same thing comes up. I'm like, "Oh, okay, like, there's some deeper stuff you haven't tapped into yet that's
mm,
now coming up," and but it's just so healing. It's the coolest. So
Yeah, that has to be interesting just seeing those dynamics play out on your end. And especially as I'm sure over the years, you've gotten more of a feel and an intuition to it as you've developed more and more of your skills as a clinician. Just, it's fascinating.
yeah, it's such a gift, honestly. Like it's just I'm always baffled of like this is what I get to do now. This is so cool, and to see people heal and come out the other side of things is just like how do you even put a price tag on that? Because it's I mean, I've had the really honor and privilege to work with a lot of veterans, which is just such a special group for me. But man, I to see things of like we've talked about alcohol, of somebody who's been a functioning alcoholic for 24 years, to see them put the bottle down and not pick it up again, or to totally save their relationship, or to, literally not decide to take their life. Like, how do you even put a price tag on that kind of stuff? It's just so cool, and I'm just so blessed to do the work. And yeah, I'm here still healing and growing too. So I haven't arrived by any means, but we heal together. That's the cool thing, is nobody comes into my world and doesn't make some profound impact on me too. So it's so much bigger than we can even put words to, but it's just such a gift to do this work. I really, really blessed.
I love it. And it's cool that, I mean, you didn't just happen upon this, right? Like you'd invested a lot of years into something else, found out it wasn't the right fit, and then took the risk to step out in a different direction. And now you're here. Seems like it's, I mean, pretty damn fulfilling and obviously very, I mean, just almost potent impact wise. Again, I mean, you're stopping someone at the farthest extent, stopping someone from taking their life, which is, yeah. How do you put a value on that, right? Or how do you even comprehend that like your work with someone has made those changes? That's pretty crazy. And I mean, that's one person having that impact on many. It's a lot of power in your hands.
But then they go about out though, and then they have their impact, which is what it's all about,
Mm,
right? It's like it's just I'm just one person. But then, people will go out and they'll impact, dozen
yeah.
people or more, and then they go out and impact, and it's just so profound over time how
Yeah.
big of a deal it is. It's just like we can make such a big difference, that even on the individual level, but it makes such a global impact as well.
It does. And like if people, I mean, hear that again, one that difference in one person rolls over into their relationships at home and then their workplace and then their communities, and someone that they've impacted sees that and is inspired to try and make the same changes, and it does. It's just this cascading of events, and it's, yes, that is a very warm and fuzzy way to look at it, but that is also what happens. It's not every time, but that like that the webbing effect is a real thing. I mean, that's part of the beautiful thing about humans, and that idea of paying it forward, whatever it is, in
Mhm,
whatever capacity you're looking at that from. Like that does happen. We pass that along. So,
mhm.
have I missed anything that I should have asked about here, before we start to wrap this thing up?
Gosh, I mean, I could talk about this stuff all day, of
I
course,
know
but
it's tough with all these conversations, but
yeah, but I think it's just, like, what I try to always encourage people, for one, is that decide that you're worth the investment, decide that you're worth it, and that make yourself a priority, that whatever it takes, and don't give yourself an expectation or a deadline, is know that this is a journey. There is no finish line, but it's one step at a time, and keep trying things till you find something that works, and be open to the toolbox, because it doesn't have to be the traditional way of things. It can be so many different things, and there is so many different things out there now. It's incredible what there is, but just see yourself as worthy of the investment and know that you have to keep investing in yourself. It doesn't just stop. You don't just arrive. And so that's my biggest message, is that you are worth it. So make the investment.
Yeah. And also, like, in I think in those capacities, you have to be selfish. Like, if you want to make the change, it has to be for you, not for someone else. Because if that's, you see that with people getting sober. I know I've seen that in my own experience getting sober is they really the impetus has to come from you at the end of the day. Like, it has to boil down to you actually wanting it, and no amount of someone else telling you that. Like, it truly has to be intrinsic, whether that's forced intrinsic motivation or not. But like, self-forced. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's awesome what you're doing. And I know you have a podcast as well. So where can people find the podcast and your practice?
Well, thank you. Yes, I my podcast is called Sit Around the Fire, and it's a mixture of um, people sharing their stories and their experiences and kind of what they have gone through. Because I think there's a lot of value in hearing other stories and finding the commonality where we can relate
Yeah.
to one another. And then there's also me getting on there and talking about things like we did today. So all the things that I'm passionate about or learning about or things that I have learned in my life, it's all very relevant to stuff either from me or stuff that I'm working with people. So it's a mixture of both those things. And then you can find me at ashleadillard.com. That'll connect you to kind of all the places of social media, email, the podcast, or if you would like to do work with me as well too, you can find me there. And if I'm not the right fit either, let me know. I can help. I've got a good network of people too. So keep reaching out. But I'm here if anybody needs support, questions, or anything. I welcome all of it.
Yeah. Ashley is not spelled the way that you think. So look at the episode title and go look at the show notes and click on the link there because I'll have it there. Um,
Yes. Good call.
yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on here and delving into all this with me. This has been great. And I think we're 100 some episodes in now, and this is the first time we've gotten to talk about ketamine therapy and really dig into hypnosis. So this was awesome.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm excited and so glad to talk about it. And yeah, keep exploring. If you're hearing this and you're curious, just keep exploring things. So,
Yeah. Thanks. And thanks everyone at home for listening to another episode of Going In Blind. I think I'm gonna probably leave it at whatever is meant to be will come up and it's supposed to happen that way. And however she said it was a lot better than how I'm saying it now. So we'll leave it on that. If you've got a change that you need to make, again, try and it's a lot easier said than done, but if you can get to the point where you're doing it for yourself and being selfish in that way, again, it will come back around when you do make those changes and serve the people that you are maybe trying to make those changes for right now and aren't having success with it, whether that be your mental health or a lifestyle change or addiction. But as always, reach out for help. People are out there and want to help you. So ask for it because have to know that you're struggling before they can help. But now I'll get off my soapbox and I will see you next week.